Good evening. We are going to do my first live streaming session today on reflections of APA on the recent appointment of cabinet. But for the time being, I'll wait for a few more people to join before we kick off. Those who have joined, let's just test the system to make sure that you can hear me. Press like if you can hear me and you can see me as well. Press like so that I can get feedback on whether you can hear me. Yes, looks like we are on, but like I said, let's just wait for a few more people. I can see people are joining slowly, but let's give it a couple of more minutes and then we'll get cracking. I see somebody saying the video is not clear. I see some familiar faces from the UK, South Africa. Welcome. And Western Cape. That's good. I don't see anybody from North America yet. Sorry about the lighting. We'll get that sorted out over time. I suppose we need to create a kind of studio, but I'm not in that space as yet. We'll get that sorted out. Somebody said the lighting could be better. I suspect I understand why that is the case. The light is right above me, actually, not behind, but let's just see if we can kind of adjust a little bit. I think we've got quite a few people who've now joined. Let's get started, and clearly others will join as we go along. We've been through quite an exciting period, I would say, and I think the way Zimbabweans came out to indicate their wish for President Mugabe, former President Mugabe, to leave was a very clear signal that I would like to think that although respected as a human being, a lot of Zimbabweans would have agreed that it was time for him to retire and go and rest. And I think that was the signal. You'll notice that I choose my words very carefully because I believe that even as we asked the former president to retire, we should still, in a typical African way, in my opinion, be respectful. And I think that's what Zimbabweans did. people turned up, demonstrated without any violence, without anything, any looting. It was quite amazing, actually. And I think that that's a demonstration of what we are capable of. And hopefully, as we go forward, we'll get a leadership that can exploit that in a positive way, use Zimbabweans' natural inclination to be peaceful, to be respectful, to be institutional in their behavior, to build a country that we can all be proud of. And I think Zimbabweans demonstrated that in full measure. So that's where we started from. I think what then followed, or what was expected, and some people voiced it explicitly, was that that demonstration was not partisan. The demonstration was clearly Zimbabweans in all their colors and their beliefs and the parties they represented came together as Zimbabweans above all, without any of these other lower levels of categorization, and said, we are a nation, there is things that we need to come together for and execute as a whole. And when one listened to what people were saying, you kind of got the impression that the expectation was that the administration that was going to be put in place subsequent to that demonstration was also going to reflect the participations of Zimbabweans just as Zimbabweans, not on a partisan basis. So what has happened since cabinet was formed is, I think, expressions of disappointment, I would say, because people felt that there was no relationship or no sufficient appreciation of what Zimbabweans did and why they did what they did. That did not translate into how the cabinet was then constructed as representing a change from one thing into a different future, which was much more inclusive and reflecting of an embracing of diversity to create a nation that we can all say we own and are proud of. So I think that's this first thing that one needs to note. Having said that, I think we would also have to acknowledge that there are certain things which would have gotten quite complicated in forming an inclusive cabinet, in the sense that we've got elections which are just down the road. A few, hopefully, within 12 months, on this side of 12 months, we'll have an election. To have opposition parties participating in government when we are so close to an election would not have been that straightforward either. Because how do you go out and campaign and at the same time actually be critical of an administration within which you are participating? So in some respects, I think although people are disappointed because of what we went through and the demonstrations and the demonstration of unity, if you like, there is also, I think, a benefit in President Mnangagwa not having included the opposition in his administration, in clarifying that we are headed to an election and opposition parties ought to be focused on offering the population, the electorate, a proposal and offer a value proposition of what they are going to do differently from what is being done by ZANU, which is the ruling party. So let's not get too despondent about this outcome. I think let's look at the flip side of the disappointment of no inclusive cabinet to looking at the clarity and the focus it allows opposition parties to have as they prepare for the election. So that would be my observation on that. Having said that, what is my take on how we got to be where we are? APA has issued a couple of statements in the last few weeks. And these statements have emphasized that as people offer themselves to lead our nation, they need to demonstrate why we are where we are. They need to demonstrate that they are very much aware of why we've gotten to be where we are. Because if they attempt to lead us into the future in a manner that does not take into account why we've ended up here, then the likelihood is that we're not going to depart significantly from the path that we're already on as a nation. Now, I think that, again, not before the president even, the army, through General Chiwenga, indicated that part of the exercise was to get rid of corruption from our society. And we saw Minister Chombo being arrested, and I think he's going through a court process as we speak. So from that indication of an awareness of what has destroyed our society, what has undermined our economy, what has undermined our institutions as articulated by the army, one would have expected, therefore, that the formation of the new cabinet would begin to speak to the same issue. And I'm sorry that I don't think I can deal with this issue without doing what I don't normally do. I don't normally like to personalize, but I want to be quite concrete in illustrating what the problem is. I travel through the country quite a lot, and when I go to Matabeleland, one of the things you hear, right or wrongly, from people in Matabeleland is that they don't think that Minister Obet Mpofu's lifestyle is consistent with the income you'd expect from a minister in government. And therefore, I think there is a red flag that gets raised when the population, for whatever reason, cannot reconcile the existence of somebody like Obet Mpofu in a new administration, which is trying to persuade us that we've learned lessons that we're going to apply as we move into the future, and we're going to remove the cancer of corruption, nepotism from our society. So there is a bit of a problem there. And I think I would like to point out that it needs to be addressed. That's point number one. Point number two, I think we can applaud the president for attempting to reduce the cabinet, the size of the cabinet. But we as APA would argue that he could have done even more. And maybe it's a question of what is the approach to be used in order to reduce cabinet. We saw a little bit, and I will illustrate our approach and acknowledge that the president actually did something which began to signal that he is aware of the methodology that can be used. I noticed that he's put international trade with foreign affairs, which makes a lot of sense. We as APA would have gone further, and I'll use that same department, if you like. At the moment, foreign affairs is a cost center, but international trade and tourism are to do with international affairs, actually. And therefore, there is nothing to stop a government that is focused on reducing the cost of government and governance, combining those three functions: tourism, international affairs, and international trade. I would have put those three together. The other thing that APA is very clear about is that we as a sub-region, and I want to cluster very specific countries. If you take our history of the liberation struggle and you look at Tanzania, Mozambique, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, and the Malawi included just by virtue of where it sits, and I'm not excluding, I want to illustrate a principle, that's why I named those countries. These countries have got a very rich history in terms of solidarity and how we fought the liberation struggle. Where we have failed, it is to use exactly that history to create an approach to industrialization where we create a bigger domestic market, a bigger economy based on our history. I am absolutely convinced, and the APA is in this space, that when you take those countries that I've just named and you approach them and they use the platform of our history, we could reconfigure our economies to create one economy which is of significance as a domestic economy. In other words, let me just name the countries again: Tanzania, Mozambique, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. And of course, this would be the nucleus of something which would get bigger as you then include Botswana, Namibia, DRC, and South Africa. My perception is that South Africa would probably, for the time being, really not understand how this needs to be done. Let me be illustrative. We've got Dunlop in Zimbabwe and in Bulawayo, which is struggling. If you take that cluster of countries and you're wanting to create a cluster which, on the basis of which you develop industrialization built on a significant domestic economy, then a Dunlop in Zimbabwe should not be replicated in the other countries. But in order for that to work, you'd have then to look at the economies of the other countries and look at how you make them complementary, so that as Zimbabwe sells tires to that cluster of countries without them also producing tires, you need to be able to identify what you're going to buy from them. That is a very smart architecture of what economic integration looks like. It also creates scale for each one of the countries' bases where they've got competitive advantage for them to then complement each other and create one domestic economy. So what am I leading to? It means, as I look at regional integration, I would then look at industrialization and the cluster, or what we call industry, in my mind, reconfigure that industrialization for the sub-region. And I want to create domestic, what is now a different domestic market on the base of these countries, not competing but complementing each other. So I would put in industry regional integration. That's how APA looks at how you reduce the size of cabinet by clustering functions or departments of government that belong together. It is not difficult to do, but we need to have incredible clarity. Then the other way to deal with this, remember that in APA we've also said, would scrap deputy ministers. The way to do it is that if a cluster of functions becomes too broad, you can very easily have more than one permanent secretary under one minister to cater for the broad nature of that clustering of ministries. That is the upper idea of how to reduce the size of cabinet. Like I say, we saw just a little attempt at doing this, but not enough. The second component, which is absolutely critical to how you reduce government, is decentralization or devolution, as it is in fact already catered for in our constitution. A lot of functions that have been centralized at central government level need to be pushed back into the provinces and through a process of devolution, so that at the top you retain only those functions that are required at a nationwide level. Defense, for instance, cannot be devolved. But ministries such as health and education, to a very large degree, if you look at examples of other countries, can be pushed lower down so that your devolution is properly configured to complement what happens at provincial level and what happens at national level, with only those functions that are really absolutely necessary at central government level to be retained and everything else to be pushed further down the line. But I know that although devolution is provided for in our constitution, at the moment it appears to us that there is very little appetite for implementing it. We don't understand why this is the case. We've got a constitution that already provides for it, and that constitution and that the implementation of devolution, we believe, will create more accountability at the levels where we require it to be. So that is, in short, some of what we read in what has happened. Disappointment, which I would like to persuade the people on this call to actually start flip it and look at the flip side and say, actually for the opposition parties, this is a godsend, because it means we do not get diverted into trying to run an administration which we don't really own, but we can stay focused in preparing ourselves for the upcoming elections and make sure that our articulation of what we stand for is heard by the people as they prepare to choose who should lead our country into the future. As to the quality of the cabinet, I would rather not discuss. I leave it to you as citizens of this country. You know the individuals who are in that cabinet. If we are looking at meritocracy and looking at absolute delivery, looking at people who know what they're doing, and minimizing, not totally ignoring, but minimizing politics and accentuating capacity to deliver, then I think there could be a conversation to be had whether that balance has been struck or not. We in UPA think rather not. We would have pushed that balance into much more technical managers who know what needs to be done and can deliver to give our country confidence. And on that issue, let me touch on an issue which bothers us in UPA. In our conversations, we've argued that independent Africa has colonized the youth more than the white man or the colonizer ever did. Not easy to quite understand at first, but let me explain. The way we've run our countries post-independence has created a feeling in young people through what they experience. So what do? We take our children and send them to schools which were previously white schools. We take our families and send them into private hospitals that largely, when you look across the continent, are actually owned and run by white people. We take our own people, from our own people, I should say, let me correct that. We tend to take people who are highly politicized, but less competent in terms of technical capacity, and we give them responsibility to run our institutions, such as Air Zimbabwe, for instance. Look at our hospitals. And what we then achieve is that where we've placed black managers, the institutions slowly disappear. In performance, they become second rate, if not third rate. We, the same people that are responsible for administration, then don't send our own families into those institutions. We don't send our children into those institutions. Inadvertently, we are signaling to the youth and our children that the only thing that continues to function properly on our continent is that is run by a white man. And what we run ourselves, because of the manner in which we do it, ceases to perform. Now, we are doing much more damage psychologically to our own people by not building confidence through what we do and how we do things. This needs to be reversed. If we don't do this, not only our economy is going to suffer, but the damage which is invisible, which is taking place, is that psychologically, we are socializing our youth and our children to believe that we are not good enough. This is incredibly undesirable. So it is really important for any administration that runs any African country to understand that it is time. It is time we got our own competent people who are there in numbers to run our institutions and demonstrate to our youth that we can do this and give them confidence. Let me give you an example. So recently, maybe a couple of months ago, I went to the UK and I had a meeting with professionals in the UK. Amongst these professionals, there were a few specialized doctors. And one of the lady specialist doctors told me that out of a class of about 65, Zimbabwe, a class of 65 medical students in Zimbabwe, 43 of them now are specialists in the UK. It's an investment that Zimbabwe did in educating all these people. Zimbabweans as a people are capable of achieving these high levels of performance. But for whatever reason, when we then look at creating opportunities for employing our own people who we've spent a lot of money educating, we don't find it appropriate or necessary to create the space for them to find satisfactory deployment in our society. So what do? They take off and go to other countries. They are in the UK in huge numbers, both nurses and doctors, people in finance. Look at South Africa. So we cannot pretend that we don't have the people with the skills, but we need to re-examine how we form our administrations, both in terms of performance and also in terms of role modeling. Let's begin to address this issue and take our own people who have invested, their families have invested, we as a nation have invested, but we don't create opportunities for them to excel simply because they prefer to say, I'll join MDC, I'll join APA rather than ZANU. Or I will not join a political party at all. I am a professional, but I'm available. We overlook them and go only to those people who join political parties. I think this is wrong. And APA is very clear that our members have to understand that when we win the next election, which we absolutely intend to do, we are going to look at the talent that is Zimbabwean, not the talent that resides in APA, but the talent that is Zimbabwean. And it is the talent that we're going to create opportunity spaces for in order for that talent to help us build our country, irrespective of what party they go to, what church they belong to, what age they are. In fact, maybe let me correct the last bit. We will absolutely pay attention to the age issue and create space for our youth, as we've already articulated, that we need youth ministers or youthful ministers to essentially deliver two things. Innovation comes from young people. I think this, I don't have to debate or convince anybody. I hope that you're all aware of this. We want innovation in our nation. We have to create space for young people. We have to create space for young people right up at the top so that they can push and test the system and say, why do we continue to do things in an archaic way simply because the old people are in their comfort zone? Young people will show us and push us into newer spaces and technologies, innovative ways of doing things. But it's also important for us to create spaces for young people so that they can begin to learn from the experience that the older generation brings to the table. And again, I don't believe that the last cabinet shows sufficient evidence or sensitivity to creating space, in fact, in three areas, let's say: technocrats, women, and the youth. I would say as APA, look to what we're going to do when we win. All of these things will be attended to. We'll shrink the cabinet to make sure that the cost of government is not disproportionate to the size of our economy. We'll go for a 50-50 gender balance to make sure that the other half of our population, the women, are catered for and they can contribute. They are a huge asset which we're failing to use. We'll create space for the youth in order to cater for innovation and also mentorship in, or apprenticeship, if you like, learning on the job. These are my takeaways from what has just happened, where I believe that our new president could have done better in putting together his cabinet. Let me see some questions and comments that are coming in. I think there is concurrence that we are damaging our countries by making things that Black people run appear to be second rate simply because we don't employ our own good people, which we need to address. I concur with that. I think most comments here are in agreement with my observation, so there doesn't seem to be a big debate. But let me, if you allow me, just depart a little bit from just the cabinet issues. We asked for some questions to be submitted earlier on and observations. And a lot of people, quite a few people, a significant number of people, are criticizing us for appearing to be just on social media, and they are questioning whether we are equally out in the rural areas. Believe me, we are. First, let me just observe, hopefully light-heartedly, that the questions that came back from people who are on social media. So these are people who, in fact, I suspect are participating in this exchange. But let me just assure you that we are absolutely out there. I've been to Gokwe, I've been to lots of places, Chipinge, but remember that what APA has said. We've said that we want to campaign in a very different way. We are not using the tools that have been used in the past because we are not naive to the toxic environment that our country challenges us with. You know that our people get abused, they get identified, beaten, killed even, their homes get burnt, and we as responsible leadership are trying to risk manage all these things and not expose our followers to unnecessary risk. And we've said we want a campaign which reaches everybody, but that campaign is low-key. Low-key in the sense that we want the people to own the campaign. I go to places because people are calling me to go to these places. We are building a countrywide infrastructure which is largely now in place. Our provincial chairs are responsible for building. They've built, in fact, we've got provincial chairs, we've got district coordinators, we've got constituency coordinators and ward coordinators. It is these people who call me to address small groups of people, in fact, not address, but exchange views, listen to them, interact with them, and they share our thoughts as we listen to their worries. To be compliant and consistent with our name, APA stands for Alliance for the People's Agenda, which means we are a listening organization. It's more important for people to talk to us than for us to talk to people. We need to demonstrate the ability to listen to what is bugging people rather than go preaching to people. That's how we are doing this. So we are everywhere. We are talking to people. We are not holding rallies as yet because we don't believe that a quality dialogue, a quality conversation happens at a rally. At a rally, you get those who are addressing people, not telling people what they think, as opposed to listening what people want you to hear. That's why we've adopted this methodology of our campaign. Much more listening, interacting with small groups of people so that they've got the space to tell us what is going on in their lives. They need to tell us what they want us to address. So we are talking to people, but maybe also very critically, what I want you all to take away. We really need to change our politics in the following way. This campaign is not Nkosana Moyo campaign. It is your campaign. But what does that mean, it is your campaign? It means if you believe in what we stand for, in which is what? A functioning economy, a unified country, a country where institutions work, and especially institutions of state are separated from a political party, a country that is respected globally because of what it does, how successful it is. Zimbabweans are respected in their individual capacity. We want to create a collective so that the country itself is respected. This is what we aspire for. If you identify with these things, take APA as your own and you campaign in your own space. Within your sphere of influence, within your friends and family, make this your campaign. Once you understand that, it means you don't look to APA to be saying, I'm looking for APA, because you are APA. And the way you are, you now need to sell this idea that we can create this country which is represented by the things I've just articulated. Take the initiative and own APA and then talk to your networks. Whether you are in the diaspora or not, remember, this country is afloat today because the diaspora are supporting it through the remittances process. So the same people that you are supporting are people you should talk to and sell the concept of the country that I've just articulated. On the campaign, talk to your networks and make sure that we all work together to deliver this country. Because I am so clear in my mind, this thing we can do and we are going to do. Join the party, be part of APA, but once you are part of APA, don't keep asking Nkosana saying, where are you? Because where you are is where APA is. Start owning this agenda and please spread it to everybody and this job will be done. And it will be so simple, you'll be amazed. Because people in urban areas, people in the diaspora, you've got relatives because of our structure of extended family relationships. We are covered, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to be done. Let's execute. That's all that remains for us to do. So let me just look at a few more comments. Yeah, have I been asked to join the new government? The answer is no, I've not been asked. And I've already said earlier on, I think it's a good thing that the opposition parties have not been asked so that we can focus on preparing for the election. So this is good. Whereas I understand the disappointment of Zimbabweans who were expecting that maybe we can create something more inclusive, which APA is going to do anyway, but going up away from just political parties. We're going to look for Zimbabwean skills wherever they exist, in the diaspora, within political parties and outside political parties. We are going to build a government which is capable by calling on Zimbabweans with skills to come and help us build this country. And we know we've got them. Somebody is asking about our provincial structure. We have got a provincial structure. So maybe what I should have done is literally we're going to do this. So don't worry. Next session, what I might do actually, and we'll consult and see how best to do this. Maybe we should get together as an upper leadership, especially the provincial leadership, and show them to you, give you their contacts, and we take it from there so that this question does not keep coming up. We've got all that in place. There is a provincial leadership building, driving the building of our networks and our campaign. So they are in place. There is somebody here who is disagreeing that he or she claims that our approach will not achieve the desired results. In other words, I take it that this refers to the type of campaign we are running, which does not include rallies to date. We are convinced that this structure works because we are talking to Zimbabweans and Zimbabweans are talking to us. I think this, in fact, I keep saying to people, we have got a history of fighting a guerrilla warfare. This is the way we did it and we executed. I do not see now why people have got so little faith in the fact that this can be done. It can be done and it will be done. There is a question about the education system that is suffered underfunding in the last 10 years or thereabouts. Again, you see, funding for anything that we do is going to come from two things. And in most life, it is actually the same. On the one side, you need to control your costs so that money that can be deployed elsewhere does not get into a sink that is just cost. The size of government issue refers to the redirection of resources appropriately. The second part, clearly you have to create the revenues in the first place. Controlling costs does not guarantee creation of revenue, but the two things need to be addressed at the same time. Companies are exactly the same. A growing economy guarantees you a growing revenue stream. But on the other side, if you're not careful, you'll take that money and use it for paying government salaries, which is what we're doing at the moment. So we will both develop our economy so that it creates jobs, but creates also a growing revenue stream through taxation into government. On the other side, we'll be very careful about the deployment of that resource so that there is money left set aside appropriately to go into education and things like health. We have already said as APA that our intention is that as our economy grows, we're going to implement progressively until we are 100% on free education and free health. But clearly, it will be a gradual process because as the economy at the moment is literally in the doldrums, it is not feasible for Zimbabwe today to fund free education and free health. But as soon as our economy begins to grow, we'll build up in a very systematic way, phased way, until we achieve 100% provision of free education and free health from the taxes we collect from a healthy and growing economy. That's what we'll do. Maybe I should, there is a comment here about the issue of corruption. Let me just again stress this. Why we need to understand why a paternal system, a system based on corruption, cannot deliver results. You see, if I employ my relatives and put them in important jobs, what follows immediately is that I remove the capacity to performance manage my administration. Because it is not likely that if I give my wife a job, my daughter a job, my son a job, and they underperform, that I, as their father, will then turn around and say, you failed and therefore I fire you. So in order to avoid the problem of lack of performance management, you absolutely have to avoid nepotism. The minute you implement a nepotistic system, you are also going to kill performance management, and your system will spiral downward because you will never be able to manage it properly. So that's why corruption and nepotism and the patronage have to be removed from our system. So if you look, and I mean, I don't have to spell it out for everybody. You've got eyes and ears and you can observe, you're smart enough. Look at any administration that is put in place. The minute you detect that there is nepotism and the patronage within how it's done, I can guarantee you, I'm prepared to put money on the table that the performance of that administration will be suboptimal. That's just the way life works. Somebody has put a comment about you want the diaspora, yet the MDC is the one fighting for the diaspora vote. Why not join us? APA is fighting for the, I do not know where you got the impression that only the MDC is fighting for the diaspora vote. We in APA believe absolutely that the diaspora have to be treated as an asset to a country. When you look at successful countries, let me use the example of Israel, a country like Israel. Israel is where it is, very successful, because it gets a lot of support. Even its international relations are managed through its diaspora. Its relationship with the US, for instance, it's hugely dependent on what its citizens who are based in the US do for it in the US. So we have got to learn that our people, no matter where they choose to reside, they don't have to be in Zimbabwe. As long as they are citizens of this country, their rights cannot be compromised. Their rights have to be protected so that they are an asset for the country, no matter where they live. So my view and APA's view is that when we are fighting for diaspora rights, we are not even saying people should come back to Zimbabwe. You are a Zimbabwean by right, no matter where you choose to live. Your rights will be protected no matter where you reside. We know that you will begin to give back to your country in an appropriate way when your country respects you and treats you appropriately. So that's what we believe in, the diaspora. And as a result of this belief, it means our missions abroad have to be totally retrained to understand how to look after our people, because an embassy is supposed to be an extension of this country. It's Zimbabwe in London, it's Zimbabwe in Washington or New York. So the embassy in that country has to look after our citizens over there so that they feel they are at home away from home. Our embassies would be retrained. The people that are employed to look after them would be chosen much more in line with this thinking, where they can promote tourism, they can promote international trade, international relations, and very importantly, look after our citizens who happen to be there. That's how it should work. So we are absolutely on board in terms of the diaspora vote, but way bigger than that, the rights of our citizens and their security, no matter where they live. People need jobs, jobs, and jobs. Absolutely agree. That's from Sai Tingo. Absolutely. That's why we keep stressing this issue. If you own a company and you are looking for the CEO to run that company to deliver certain results, you have to have clarity about what kind of person you want to employ. And in your campaign, now let me call it your campaign, our campaign, as you go around the country, campaigning for the next election, please explain to people that if we want jobs, 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 it follows, if we are going to be consistent, that the economy is way up there in terms of ability to deliver. Therefore, if we are going to be truthful to what we're claiming is the priority, we need to choose an administration headed up by somebody who has got the experience and the skills to be, and the international network, because of mobilization of resources in investment form, will allow us to unlock all of the elements that go to deliver to a successful and growing economy. So that's a major part of this campaign. Explain on the campaign, and in your explaining to people how to choose a leader, make them understand. If you want, as you often say, when you want somebody to come and fix your plumbing at your house, you have to look for a plumber. If you want somebody to come and sort out your electrics at your house, you look for an electrical engineer. If we want somebody to come and fix our economy, let's follow the same kind of logic. Let's look at somebody who understands how an economy functions, so that our financial institutions, our banks, begin to function in the manner in which banks are meant to function. What are they supposed to do for us? Be custodians of our money. But if they are custodians of our money, they must stay liquid so that when you want to get your money, you get it. At the moment, we don't see that. And that is because we've allowed people who do not understand how to run an economy to run an economy. Let's change this. We've got an opportunity to do so in the coming elections. What is our strategy for building infrastructure in cities that are in dilapidated form? In this day and age, because there is always going to be, believe it or not, even as we run an efficient administration and a small administration in the functioning economy, there will always be more demand for resources than the resources that we have. So we've got to find very smart ways of how to mobilize resources and then not put a burden on government that the government cannot carry. What does that look like in infrastructure? When you look at the developments, innovations in the financing of infrastructure space. So we've got, for instance, in Zimbabwe at the moment, we've got a toll road system. But the way you build toll roads in order to accelerate the unlocking of global resources is to go into what is now very popularly called PPPs, public-private partnerships. Those partnerships allow the government to play the role of de-risking the investment, but allowing the private sector that has got the money to deploy money into building the infrastructure. Once you create those partnerships, the revitalization of our infrastructure can happen very, very quickly. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to look for private sector partners who have got the resources to partner with us, so that the role we play is to de-risk and to some extent guarantee them the security of their investment, but they mobilize the resources that we need to build the infrastructure. That's how we do it. There is again a question here about lip service. How are you fighting for the diaspora and you pay lip service? You know, one of the things about APA is that we do not promise people things that we cannot do. We only promise people things that we can deliver, and therefore also the manner of that promise, the structure of that promise. Who can deliver the diaspora vote? It's a sitting government. So we are saying to you, and that's a promise we absolutely will not go back on. Vote for us, mobilize for APA to be elected, and the diaspora vote will be delivered. Absolutely no questions asked. Is there anything we can do to force ZANU to give the diaspora the vote? The answer is no. If you want to be very honest, there is nothing you can do. You can talk until you're blue in the face, but the ZANU government would itself have to say, we do this. And at the moment, there is no sign whatsoever that they've got an appetite to get that done. APA will do this. We promise you it will be done. So you want an APA government, and what we can deliver will deliver for you total rights for our citizens, no matter where they reside, as I've said. Whether you live in the US, in the UK, Europe, wherever, you will be treated and respected as a Zimbabwean. And the nearest point of delivery for that for you will be our embassies, which will also be rationalized, by the way, so that we just don't spend money we don't have. But we as APA can promise you the diaspora vote is a done deal. It's done. There is somebody who is saying that live streaming does not deliver. So why is there this controversy about live streaming? Live streaming, clearly we ourselves are, I think, quite clear that there are different audiences. There are different constituencies. There is an audience which has got access to social media. And therefore, that audience can be reached and should be reached through this method. And we are reaching them. But the assumption that some people are making, which I'm trying to make you understand is not correct, is that this is the only method we are using. Because it is not, believe me. We are out there. I've told you already, we've built the structures in the country. We are reaching people. We are just doing it differently from what has been done before. We have got a country. You see, this is the other quite puzzling issue. We've got a country that is not working. In spite of all of these methods having been used, the truth is we've got a country that is dysfunctional. So why do you want us to continue to use methods that have been used to deliver us to where we are? Why don't you just be sufficiently accommodating to see what the results are going to be? Let's get to the elections and see. And then we'll have this debate after the event, after the results have come in. You'll be surprised. We are where we need to be, and we're delivering. We are interacting with the people. And like I say, just those who are skeptical, which is, of course, you're right, but wait and see wait for the results, and you shall see. What is my take on marginalization? I talked earlier on about devolution. APA believes in devolution. Therefore, there can be no marginalization if you implement devolution. You also get better accountability because the arms of delivery of our administration will be very close to where the people are. And the development of this country will be very uniform. We are committed to this. You cannot have a successful country where development is done on a basis of marginalizing certain regions of the country. We are going to structure our government, firstly, in a manner that every Zimbabwean looking up into that administration will see representation, either on the basis of geography, gender, or age. You'll see that represented because although we've been very clear about meritocracy, there is no segment of this country that does not have good people. Therefore, meritocracy does not get in the way of representation in whatever dimension you like. Our meritocracy is built and will respect representation, both geographically, gender-wise, and age-wise. So we'll deliver on that, and marginalization as a result will be pushed back. It will not exist. We want to build not a successful province, but a successful Zimbabwe, which means all of the provinces of this country will be successful because we pay attention to all of them. There is a comment here about somebody. I won't give you a name, but I want to address the issue. Somebody is calling somebody else childish and pathetic and so on, and having pathetic, childish tendencies. One of the things I want to appeal to Zimbabweans, fellow Zimbabweans, is that if we are going to run a country that is successful and that can manage diversity, that kind of society requires to be able to manage disagreement and different opinions in a respectful way. I don't think there is a contradiction between having divergent views and being respectful. Both can be done. And I would like to appeal that we actually traditional as a people, we've got a very good way of interacting and disagreeing, yet we respect each other. If we're going to build a society where we can benefit from the tension that is necessary from a divergence of views, diversity of views, a tension that is constructive, we need to welcome, absolutely welcome, different opinions, but handle them in a manner that people feel they can disagree and have a voice. If we fail to do that, we will not succeed. And if we fail to do that, it means we know better than what we've seen before us. We have to be able to manage diversity and disagreement and welcome it, in fact, because what diversity of views does, it forces you to think more deeply about what the issues are. It forces you to look at things you may not have thought about. So please, let's celebrate people who push back and disagree and offer a different take on how things could be. Let's welcome that. Let's celebrate it. I can guarantee you, as we get comfortable in that space, we're going to unleash amazing talent and creativity and innovation within our society. So let's be polite, but absolutely welcome disagreement and diversity of opinion. And there is also a comment about people who say pass with this and the other. By the way, I've got very good friends who are war veterans. And they explained to me that during the war, pass literally meant that somebody should be killed. And clearly during that period, it was appropriate to have such an attitude, expression, and kind of behavior. But part of what we are failing to recognize is that the liberation war phase is over. It formed a very important foundation on the basis of which we should be building now a new country as we move forward, a peaceful country, a country where even those who were protagonists in the war become partners. Again, I like to use examples. If you look at Europe and you look at the world wars, the nations that were at war with each other in that time, today are partners in the construction of continuing construction and building of the economy of the world, and primarily let's focus on Europe. We need to understand that when you go to war, you go to war for a reason. When you've achieved the objectives of that struggle, then it is important to change gear, and more often than not, actually also change the kind of leaders, because the leaders who take you and execute a successful war are not necessarily the same people you need in terms of skill set and temperament and approach to life in order to build a peaceful, cohesive country that is much more on, not on destruction, but rather on building. And I think as we go into this next election, we've got an opportunity to revisit this issue. We fought a liberation war. We won it. Now we're in a different phase of building. Whilst we respect and thank and honor our war heroes, we now need to look for a different skill set to build our country, to build our economy, and taking care of and respecting, like what other countries do all over the world. They look after their war veterans. They respect them. They honor them. But they look for different skills to build the country. Fighting a war and building a country are different skills. Let's wake up to this fact and apply it. Ndumiso is just reiterating that respect for diversity is paramount importance. Agreed. Yes, there's quite a few comments that are emphasizing that point, and I'm glad to see that there is agreement all around that the tension that comes from disagreeing is not negative. Disagreeing allows people to put different views on the table, and our challenge should be how to synthesize the different elements which make us build a better reality, which takes account of different perceptions and different perspective of things. So please, let's cultivate the capacity to manage diversity, to manage different views, and build a country where people feel comfortable to disagree, because that means they will be allowed, they will be able to say, I can see what you're saying, but if you consider this and this and the other, which is really an important element in terms of benefiting from the different contributions from people with different exposure, different experience, different perspectives and views. Even if you look at just the issue of diversity within the country, we've got people who live in the rural areas, we've got people who live in peri-urban areas, people who live in the urban areas. Their pitch points are not the same. So we need to have a capacity not to diminish any one of these experiences, but listen carefully, take it on board and integrate it into the solution that we're going to put in place. I'm not sure where this is coming from. Apparently somebody thinks that I'm only good as a finance minister. It's a view, it's an opinion. As we've just said, people are allowed to have different opinions. But if you try to look at the things I've done, I think you'd have to admit, whoever raised the issue, that the different jobs I've held at very senior level demonstrate that I can actually do strategy and strategize incredibly well, if I may say so. So I would respectfully suggest that you form a view on what you think I'm capable of by looking at what I've actually done rather than just speculating. And you might change your view or opinion on that. There is a question about do more meetings in Shona and Ndebele. I absolutely do this. When I'm in Bulawayo, I'm Ndebele, I'm ngesikhiwa. When I'm in areas like in Mashona land, clearly, ndinotaura navanhu nechishona, not nechirungu. So I do these sort of things. I address people depending on where I am and who is there. I'll use the language that I consider to be appropriate, because fortunately for me, I can speak both Shona and Ndebele. That's not a problem. We need servants in upper, not leaders. Agreed. We believe, as upper, we believe in servant leadership. I think we should not dismiss the issue of leadership, provided it is the correct. What we do not believe in and don't want is rulership. Leadership, which is meant to be able, what is a leader? Let me use an architect because I think it's a very good illustration of what leadership is. Any architect, generally speaking, is somebody who can visualize a reality before it's there. In other words, a building with all its intricacies, like a mall, for instance, they can see it in their mind before it's even there, and then they'll reduce it to a blueprint, put it on paper, and then mobilize the resources necessary, the partnerships necessary, bricklayers, and so on, and get it done. That is what appropriate leadership is, to be able to take your society and help them get into the future and see what is possible and get them to believe in what, explain what the future could be like, get buy-in, and then mobilize the necessary partnerships to deliver it. But it all should be in service of the society, not in self-service of the people who are in leadership positions. If it's that kind of leadership, then there is nothing wrong with using the word leadership, but it has to be servant leadership. It's leadership in order to satisfy the needs of your society. That is the only meaningful leadership, and that's what we believe in as APA. There is a question I'm trying to understand here. There was a question about empowering the Ndebele. Oh, by the way, again, a lot of people, even today, don't seem to understand who I am. Nkosana, I am Karanga. I come from the Midlands. My mother is Nkomo. She is Ndebele. My wife is from Mutare. She is a Mutasa. So I have to say that kind of makeup does make it easier. I must confess that I don't think tribally. I just don't think tribally. And I think it's a very important point for us to pay attention to. We should not be looking at tribes in a manner of favoring one tribe over another. We should be looking at tribes in the sense of the richness which comes from diversity. We should celebrate it, nurture it, and accommodate it, but all of our citizens should come together to build a joined up Zimbabwe, a successful Zimbabwe. We should use our numbers in that diversity to build a value proposition that is unbeatable. But the platform on which that is built must be a platform that respects, recognizes the legitimacy of, nurtures, and allows to grow the diversity which depends on geography and tribe and all of these things. There should be no discrepancy or conflict between them. Let's celebrate the diversity, pull it together, and use its strength to build a winning nation. We can do it. Yeah, some people are in agreement. I thank you very much. People agree, and people also refer to my track record as a basis on which to have faith that this thing we can do. But again, let me just stress that I would only be part of a team. And the word team, we keep using the word team, but I don't think we really understand what it means. There is no team member who is more important than another. A team only delivers because all the members of the team are respected, respect the team in which they belong, and accept the discipline that they are not lone rangers, but work together to deliver as a team. That I am very, very conscious of that. I would contribute as a team member and hopefully guide a winning team because I have been places, I understand, I've seen the world, I understand different disciplines which I've gone through, and I think that's a huge contribution to how a team should work. Let me also just share with you an observation I've made is I've observed African cabinets. African cabinets on the whole are not teams because the head of state normally divides the cabinet so that it works on bilateral basis. Each minister negotiates directly with the head of state, as opposed to each minister proposing policy to cabinet, to the total team. So a minister should propose a policy that comes from their portfolio. But it is the cabinet that should debate and own the policy. Then the minister goes back to implement on behalf of the cabinet owning the policy. And again, I tell you that I share that with you to simply emphasize the team element. There is no team member who is more important than another. The success will depend on this respect and the discipline of understanding how a team works. And when we form a team of good people who work together as a good team, we are unbeatable. But if you get very good people who don't have the discipline to work as a team, you will fail. This is proven even in sports. People who are in a gathering of prima donnas who do not respect each other as a team get beaten by second-rate members who understand how a team should work. So that's something that we in the upper are very awake to. Oh, I clearly have gotten carried away. I notice it's already after 8 o'clock. So can we draw this to a close? Let me just take a few more, maybe a couple of comments and draw this to a close. And we shall do this regularly. So please, let's use this as just the opening and hopefully it creates a momentum. And those who keep criticizing us for using just social media, please understand we are campaigning in all other means. This is just one facet which addresses a particular audience, but it does not mean that we know all of the others. We hear you very loudly and clearly, and we are doing just that. Thank you, thank you. There are some people who are simply expressing their appreciation for both APA and this session and myself. Very much appreciated. Let's get this job done. Own the initiative. Please own it. It's our campaign. Remember, Zimbabwe is not my country. Zimbabwe is our country. And therefore, if the framework of APA that we've painted talks to you, take it, own it, and go and sell it. And convince our fellow citizens that this is worth doing and will deliver a fantastic product and a very successful country. Thank you very much and good night.